I'm going to call this commission, the Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone Board, to order. We do have a quorum. I'll ask for any public comment from anyone on items that are not on the agenda, but any other subject matter that relates to our business. Seeing none, we'll move to item 3 on the agenda. Consideration of approving the minutes from the February 22nd, 2022 meeting. You should have those in front of you. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the February 22nd, 2022 meeting. Any other comments or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Okay, financial report. Mr. James.
Thank you. John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. Just briefly going through the financial report, it's similar to what you see every month. This is for the South, beginning balance of the year, $644,000, ending balance of $143,000. I will point out that that does not yet reflect the most recent cases or incentive grants that were approved of about $110,000, and so that number is sitting closer to $30,000.
Why doesn't it include it?
It's a process. We have to send over a budget request over to the Finance Department.
Can't y'all do that internally?
No, it is internal. It just takes a few weeks.
I mean, your office, I mean, you subtract what you got outstanding from 143.
We could. We get this report. So we used to actually provide you all a report that we prepared based on the information from Finance. And then we would adjust the numbers just like you're talking about. And then for a couple of reasons, we ended up just asking for their report and presenting you their official report as of the date that they provided it. So
I'm just one person, but I would like to see a current report done by the staff, and if y'all got outstanding balances, you give us a report that's more accurate than 143. We see that on our emails, and we say, well, they hadn't taken off what we just approved last month.
Really 2 months ago. Well,
we ought to have about $6,000 left. Is that
well,
right?
and I think what I can do is still provide you all with the document that they give us, but we can supplement it with like a summary sheet.
That would be helpful.
That's
That would be
updated.
helpful.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
but John, those would be the items that 110,000 or whatever, that would have been what we approved in the February
Correct.
meeting. So it's 2 months ago.
Well, from the city council meeting last month, I think you and I talked when we had a private conversation, John, that we had about $6,000 left in the South.
Well, and we'll have to go back because sometimes they adjust the numbers, and so I'm not sure why that discrepancy. I think part of it is we actually had a project that came in under budget, and so when they finished the project, they didn't get all the money that we had promised them because it came in under budget, and so that money gets moved back into the available for funding.
Well, if you would doctor it each month and give us what your best estimate is for the outstanding balances for both funds and take out for the encumbrances, then that would be helpful to me.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. And that's going to be the same here. There's the $150,000 that you all had approved and has now gone to council and they approved it. It just hasn't shown up in the finance report. And so that number should be about $2,009,000 as of right now. As you know, it does not reflect, you all had voted to fund a number of South projects with North funds. And I'll get to that later in the agenda, but that has not been voted on by city council yet.
Right,
And
yeah.
so,
The council did approve it, right?
no, not that,
No,
not
they
that
did not.
piece. Again, I'll get to that and explain a little
Okay.
more in detail
Yeah, no,
in a little
no,
bit.
didn't give any.
But again, that's the overview of the financial report. I'd be happy to answer any other questions if y'all have them.
Okay, do we have any other questions regarding the financial report? Have a motion to accept the report?
So moved.
Have a motion and a second? No second, sir? Greg, do you second? Okay, second, thank you. All right, any other questions or comments regarding the financial report? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, sir. Now we have item number 5, presentation on fire sprinklers. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, I'm Ross Coleman, I'm the administrator for the Fire Marshal's Office.
Okay,
Wanted
sir.
to talk to you a little bit about fire sprinklers, particularly since y'all use TIRZ funding for that. It's an undisputed fact that fire sprinklers save lives. NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Association, has indicated that 89% of civilians have a reduced death rate, and there's a 60% reduction in firefighter injuries. Unlike your Hollywood movies, fire sprinklers are heat-activated items, okay? So they don't all go off at one time. There's lots of disputes about, you know, this thing's gonna go off, it's gonna destroy my place and flood out the whole facility. But it has to be a certain temperature at that one individual head to go off. So that's important to note too. These requirements for fire sprinklers, they vary by occupancy type and occupant load. So we don't require them for every building. Typically in the downtown setting in this TIRZ district, they'd be required for assembly occupancies, which is going to be churches, bars, nightclubs, dance halls, those types of places, and restaurants. High-rise buildings, mixed and multiple use occupancies, or in the case in a few of the places downtown where we have a business and we have residential living on the top. In that instance, we would require fire sprinklers. Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
I bring this up because your newly drafted policy for award rankings has moved health and safety improvements, which include fire sprinklers, from a high priority to a medium priority in TIRZ funding. That concerns the fire department. When an occupancy type or load determines that sprinklers are required, the cost may be significant, and that potential occupant may need that assistance from TIRZ to help get them into that door and into that building. Lowering that priority in funding may effectively change their mind, and they may not be able to afford to get in the door. So therefore, they're going to go somewhere else, and they're going to pass on a potential building, which is, you know, a building that we're going to try to get somebody on our tax roll and get downtown the way we want it to be. We always offer alternatives to these as we can. As an example, sometimes we can compartmentalize a structure to either lower the occupant load or put a firewall up between them and try to help them get in the door without putting that sprinkler in. But what we have found with these increased costs and this inflation is that people are actually spending more money trying to get out of fire sprinklers, and it's creating a big problem. So in the end, with the reductions you get in insurance rates and getting that building sprinklered and ready to go, it's a much better overall. Lowering that fire protection from high to medium, in our opinion, should not even be on the table for consideration. Fundings for items such as historic preservation and building aesthetics should not override the very components that keep people safe to enjoy and appreciate those things. We have a concern with this, and we want to spotlight those buildings that have great fire protection. We want to put them on you know, in magazines and let people know, hey, we offer a really safe community here. You know, come to San Angelo, enjoy some of the stuff we have. I've got a good friend who's young, and he's 23 years old, and he's got 70% of his body burned because he had to jump out of an apartment building in San Marcos. And he lives here in San Angelo, and he goes downtown and asks me all the time, why isn't this sprinklered? And I have to talk to him about it. I don't like the fact that we have high-rise buildings in this town that are not sprinklered, okay? And that's the way they were built. We try to keep them under the code that they were built, as long as they don't make significant changes. But I think that this is flirting with a dangerous situation. So I wanted y'all to know that the fire department does not support this change. Any questions?
Well, I don't have a question, but I'll make a statement to you. You got a champion right here in what you're asking. I don't know we'll talk to John about it and discuss it, but, it was, what was it? It was in the February meeting, John, that I got on my pedestal, and made comments about a fire sprinkler. So,
And likewise, you know, a sprinkler building, when we first do our inspection, our first customer is our firefighters. So we try to make our buildings fire safe for them to come over and help these people to get out, okay? So if we don't get our buildings sprinklered, you're putting them at risk first,
don't
and then
know.
you're putting your occupant. So I'd really like for y'all to consider that as y'all move forward.
okay. Well, any questions regarding this? But we appreciate you very much. John, do you want to respond to that, or at this
Well,
point?
I can, and actually, I was going to bring that up in item 7, because one of the things I'll be asking is if you want to bring that policy back, and there are a couple of other pieces that we may want to look at as well, so.
Okay, well, we'll take it up under item 7 then, all right? Okay, let's, and this is for Dudra. Item number 6, we're going to consider amendment to the TIRZ Board bylaws regarding the day and time for the meetings.
Yes, we were going to just bring an item to you, and then we realized it's actually, the time and date of the meeting is actually written into the bylaws. And so basically, the question for you all today is, do you want us to bring back the bylaws at the next meeting? Well, actually, we could actually vote on that today. We've written it in a way that you could vote on it today. So basically, the request is, we've had a couple of members that have a hard time some days getting here by 3. And so I think the request is if we could change the meeting start time to 3:30.
Correct.
We typically finish within the hour and a half, although we have gone from 3 to 5. We've had 2-hour meetings before. So that would push us over 5 o'clock, which is fine if that's fine with you all. But so that's really the request, is keeping it on, what is this, are we the 3rd or 4th Tuesday? 4th Tuesday of the month, but moving it from 3 to 3:30 is the question for you all.
Well, that would be my preference in deference to Dudra. And who else? We have another board member that
You
had
know,
a
I can't
similar-
remember. I thought, Brian, do you recall, I thought there was another person that,
I did too, another board member,
Tony? I
Tony.
think, yeah.
So, just to honor their time commitment and meeting their other responsibilities that are very important to this city, I'd like to do what we need to do to move the time of the day to 3:30. Now, whatever we need to do, John, tell us. And
Yeah, I think just a motion to that effect today would result in the change. Well,
I so move, we
Okay.
instruct staff to draw amendment to the bylaws, instruct the meetings begin at 3:30 PM on designated dates.
thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Thank you, Dedra. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of this, or do we have any additional comments on this? Most of the time, our meetings don't go over an hour and a half,
right.
and if we go up to 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the evening, the city can buy our supper. So, all in favor of this motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
And just a note, I will double check. I think those bylaw approvals may have to go through city council as well.
Okay.
If that's the case, we'll get it on a city council meeting. Hopefully, we can get that done before your next meeting.
All
But
right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, item number 7. Discussion and update on the status of the city council's consideration of our board's recommendation to alter the funds distributed between the north and south, or the formula thereof. Okay, John?
Yeah, just, I wanted to give you an update. The mayor had called 2 separate meetings, town hall meetings, to discuss the tiers. I think a number of the attendees to those meetings believed that the purpose was to discuss the north-south funding split. I think the mayor did not want that to be the topic of those meetings. It was discussed to a small extent, but the bulk of the meetings were to get information out to the community about the TIRZ incentive program and encourage people to apply for those. I wanted to mention 2 things that came out of the meeting that specifically might result in possible changes to the policy. One, an item that came up a couple of times was waiving the match requirement in the north. So something just for your consideration. As you know, there's a match required for all the projects in the south, and north projects over $10,000 require a 25% match. Right now, projects that are 10,000 or less do not require a match in the north only. So the request is to consider either waiving that match or maybe reducing it. One person suggested maybe a 10% match instead of 25%. I think some of the property owners that spoke at the meeting is, we've got a lot of small scale mom and pop type operations, especially in the north. And they would love the help. They just literally can't come up with the 25% match. And so if we either reduce that or eliminated it, it might help us get some of those projects going in the north.
On that particular question, I don't have any objection to having a process by where we do a waiver, but I would want to have some process in place that we make sure it's based upon need. To make sure, we're not giving waivers just to folks that can afford to provide the match. I mean, but I do want to encourage those who really can't afford the matching funds to be able to have, or staff to have some threshold by which we can measure that. So that'd be one comment.
What is the match in the north now, 25%?
25%.
Same as south.
Well, there was a proposal at one of the meetings to just drop it to 10,000 and just in the north, and and then there's also issues of equity between the north and the south. That sort of, I think you could have a process whereby which you consider that, but it just would have to be on a case-by-case basis.
Well, John Markin, I agree with you, would it? And this will be addressed to John as well, but could you come up with some kind of a formula that maybe we approve, but that it would be carried out by city staff on a confidential basis, some kind of a screening process, and then in the grant presentation, John, you or your staff members just relate to us that the screen was done, the analysis was done, and you recommend dropping it to 10%, but I don't, but whatever you come up with, would that be all right, John Mark, have more of a confidential basis?
Well, I would think so, and you'll obviously need to consult with the city attorney's office on that.
Yeah.
We'll look at that. I
information.
think the difficulty there is then you start to ask, what kinds of questions are you asking people for, tax returns, income,
Well,
corporate status,
yeah.
that kind of thing.
I was a little hesitant when the idea came up, because the first thing that came to mind is there are a lot of property in both areas is owned by, a handful of people. And so if we just did a blanket, and the individuals who are doing it really have the financial wherewithal to provide a match, I think they need to have some skin in the game too.
Sure.
But I also don't want to keep those that really can't afford it or get financing for it, to be prohibited from getting the funds.
We can look at that a little bit more and maybe bring
Let me
something back to you.
throw out a different idea, maybe. If you have a minimum grant request, say it's, I'm going to pick a figure right now, say it's $25,000 project, and you require a 10% match. I'm just picking another figure. And you have one that's more than, say, 25 to 75, 15% match. 75 to 150, put it up to 25, like we had. Does that make any sense whatsoever?
Sure.
Huh?
A tiered approach, yeah.
Yeah, because if I believe if anybody gets a grant, they ought to be able to have some skin in the game at some point, and that you can start it any way you want to. But if it's a project 25,000 or less, you're talking about a small project for a mom and pop type deal. Maybe 10% is a little too heavy. Maybe it's not. Maybe something like that.
Or maybe they could pay it over a period of time. Maybe they could pay their match over a period of time instead of lump sum.
Well, that gets into a bookkeeping thing that.
Yeah.
Well, and the problem with that is
Then you
ours
have
is
to
a
wait till the
reimbursement.
project- It's a reimbursement,
Right,
yeah.
anyway.
I just realized that after I
I
said
do
it.
think the idea maybe of making it based on the value, because You know, if it's a big property owner, big corporation or something, they're probably not doing a $25,000 project anyway. So maybe, right now, there's no match for up to $10,000. Maybe we could just up that 10,000 to a higher number, 25
Yeah.
or 40,000 or
You
something.
can keep the 10,000 at no match, but anything over 10,000, go 10%. If you got a $25,000 project, you're talking about $2,500. Now, somebody who's willing to build their business and improve it by 25,000 probably could come up with $2,500, 10% match.
Yeah.
But
Well, we'll look at that
that'd
and
be
and
my
bring
suggestion,
something back.
Go to a tiered process, and make it as effective as you can on the lower guy, and then when it gets up there, start putting it back at 25%.
Right. Okay, we'll look at that. And
So we're gonna pass that to you and your staff to come up with some recommendation. I'd like to be sensitive to
Yeah.
that input from the citizens, that we're sensitive to what they're saying, but what I don't want to do is to bring in personal, confidential, financial information on these
No.
folks that are seeking a grant, and here we're discussing
Sure.
all that. Well, I don't want, let's rely on staff to do that.
I don't want any,
Yeah.
I don't want part of it either.
Right.
Another item was asked, oh, go ahead.
Separate item, I was asked to, and approached with a very long discussion about, the north has different needs than the south as far as, since we have parking in the north versus no parking in the south, pretty much in most places, or very little parking in the south, that, some people in the north would like to be considered to be able to have paving when we don't normally consider paving. But they thought that should be a consideration we should look at.
Okay.
Because there's, you know, a lot of places in the north have large parking lots, whatever they have to maintain, versus the south doesn't have that. And so, they asked us to look at that and consider, so I'm gonna bring that up, and, without
Okay.
going into a long discussion about it, that's something I'm gonna bring up.
And just
We can
to-
have a long discussion about it at some point, but
Right, a recap of the past discussions of that, the new draft policy says that parking lots can be funded as part of an overall improvement project.
and that's what their point was, it's
But-
part of an overall pack, not just
Right.
solely, but.
But right now, you can't get funds just to repave a parking lot.
Right.
But,
That was their point, was a whole, part of the overall package.
yeah, we'll look at that one as well. Another one was getting rid of the application cycles in the north. I think everybody agrees it still makes sense in the south, but the idea is, if a north project, if they're ready to go now, and we've got all this money sitting out there, why not let them apply anytime during the year? And whenever we get an application, we can bring it to you all at the next meeting. You know, the downside for staff is we're always processing those, but, you know, we haven't gotten that many from the north that should be an administrative problem, I wouldn't think. But that was one of the requests as well, is to not make them wait to twice a year's cycle in order to submit an application.
Okay. Makes sense. Yeah.
Let's get it done.
And so, I guess the final question, then I'll get to the fire sprinklers. The question, it sounds like I know the answer, is would you like us to bring back that policy for some more discussion before we send it on to city council? They've asked us to table it for a couple of months so that they could have these town hall meetings. But given some of the discussion at the town hall meetings, I think my recommendation would be to bring it back to you all one more time for some discussion before we move it on to council,
To
because of
bring-
the things we've just
yeah.
talked about.
Help me to bring what back to us?
I'm
for
sorry, the
discussion?
incentive policies that we rewrote, we changed some things in the policies, one of which was
Okay.
the prioritization that included moving the fire sprinklers to a
no, we
medium
need
priority.
to revisit that.
And so, and that's I guess the final thing is, well, next to the last thing, it would be the fire sprinklers, and it sounds like we'll want to bring that back as a discussion item as well, when we bring back that policy, and you all can have that discussion and perhaps change that prioritization of fire sprinklers.
And we send this 50%, 50, right? That's what we sent, 50/50?
I guess I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well,
For the-
How much
he
of
wants
the
to get to where I want. Let me ask this question.
Oh,
first,
the
Brad, and then
north-south
you-
funding? Is
Yeah.
that was the last item I'm about to get to, that
Okay.
it wasn't technically part of the incentive grant policy. It's a separate issue, but that's the other thing. If you all want to bring that back before council considers it, do you all want to have more discussion on that? Your proposal to split the funds 50/50 between north and south?
Okay, well, I don't know if you want to hear us on that right now, but I'll tell you what I think, is that's the elephant that's in the room that I want to hear from you about. Why did the mayor not want to bring that up for discussion in these during these sessions with the citizens? Because that's what we
I
said.
don't think I
That
can
was
answer that. I
basically-
would defer to the mayor on
Well, that was
that.
basically what we sent to them. I mean,
Right.
that was the big black letter law that we wanted to get changed, and here we are 2 months later, or a month later, there's no action on it.
Right.
So that means all the grant requests that we sent over with that funding request are still in limbo.
That's correct.
See, to me, that's unacceptable. And I don't know I'll talk to the mayor about it, but that was the whole meat of what we wanted to get done to start with, and all these other important items. I don't mind discussing them and getting some action taken on them at some point, but,
Chairman Cummings,
yes, ma'am.
I've got something to say. I reluctantly voted, making that vote a unanimous vote. I received numerous calls in regard to, as we know and as we'd expect, the North does not want to combine the North and the South. It's like me going to one of my rich friends and saying, hey, I need $1 million of your money. They don't want that. So I know I can't probably change my vote on that, but since I represent the North, I want to be sensitive to what they want. So just let me go on record as saying my views have changed, and I would be concerned that if we did combine, who knows what the city council is how they're gonna vote, then it's very possible that there's no historic significance to anything on the North, that they may be shut out using their $2 million of funds. So there's some concern about that. So I just want to be sensitive to the people that I represent.
Well,
And yes, I represent the whole city, but I'm here on this board representing the North.
Dudra, your comments do not surprise me. I really expected you to call me and say something about folks giving you phone calls or approaching you about what, and I don't know how the issue got out if the city council didn't publicly discuss it. John, how would this matter gotten out around the community if it wasn't discussed in the city council?
Well, a number of ways. I mean, I think it,
Of course, other than watching the video of our meetings, I guess.
yeah, I mean, I think it got out. There was, now I can't remember the timeline, but I think this did come up for a discussion at the city council, and they asked to postpone the decision in order to have these town hall meetings. So it was discussed at a city council meeting where they decided to wait.
When are the town hall meetings?
They've already occurred. They were in the last 2 or 3 weeks.
And did you get anybody that was supportive of combining the funds?
They did not discuss it.
They-
They
they-
wasn't on the agenda to discuss.
I will say at the second meeting, there was some discussion about that. And there were some vocal residents and property owners in the north that spoke against it. There were some voices that spoke in favor of the split. And I'll say something I said at that meeting, just to remind folks, because I think some of the people came to those meetings thinking we were talking about putting all this money in a pot and just spending it wherever. And as you all know, your vote was actually to split it 50-50.
Right.
So there would still be a separate pot of money that's just for the north, could only be used in the north. it would just be, it wouldn't be split based on where it was earned as revenue, tax revenue. It would just be split 50-50. So I think that helped some people to understand that, yeah, the North will still have its own money. But as Dudra said, there's now money in the North. We'd be talking about initially taking $1 million from the North, moving it to the South. And then every year it would be the North would get about 100,000 less than they're getting now, and the South would get about 100,000 more. So it's not a huge amount, in terms of that split, but that initial 1 million moving from North to South is definitely a big
Well, it
chunk.
was meant as a one-time deal to try to equalize the funds once again, because we all know what happened to the South's money. I mean, it all got spent out and committed by the city to other projects. And I told the city council, had the downtown project been in the North Zone, the North would be the one without the money right now.
I disagree with that. Based on what I've learned, that the majority of the North funds are coming from the Walmart and from that, the strip malls there. And the majority of the South has got Shannon, that's nonprofit. They've got all the churches. The city has bought Standard Times. The city has bought First Financial. So all of those things are off the tax rolls. And that is why the South does not have the money that the North has.
That's one more.
What I recall about, and I guess I didn't listen good enough, but I've gone back and watched the meeting several times, is I may have been in favor of the things that Greg talked about. All of the people that were here that day, maybe funding $150,000 to get those projects completed. But like I said, it wasn't until I went back that, yes, I did hear that the thrust of a lot of the people was we combined the South and the TIRZ zone. And what I understand, I know when I was on the Beacon of the Future of the Library Board, I've since learned that what the North didn't like about that was it was money going to the county. I don't know how things are going to turn out and how we do things to satisfy everybody. However, I'm one person, so I probably can't change my vote, but I want it known that I'm going to listen to what my South constituents want, my North constituents want. I have to.
And I'll also represent the North. I've had one person have a discussion with me, and their primary concern was about the North is they did not want to lose all their funds in the long term. And we had about a 30, 45-minute discussion. And I think the North, I've been on this board about 4 years, and in everything that I've seen in the history before that and up the time we're under, the North has always had excess funds. And I do not want to take away anything that would hurt the North in any way, shape, or form. But if we have funds that are not being used in the North, is what we're seeing, and I still support shifting part of the funds. I do not want to shift funds away that would ever hurt the North. And that's why I supported the 50%. I would not support making it one pool. I would not support that, because then you potentially could take away all the funds from the North, and I'm not supporting that. And I don't, the people from the North, that's not what we proposed. But I heard that come out somewhere else, and I do not support that. But if we shifted it to a pool that we have, and as the North still has more potential to raise more funds, and one of the things we did a year or so ago, now that has come up as new business, and I think it's going to raise even more funds, is that new truck stop that came in. That's going to generate even more funds for the North and more businesses like that. With the interstate now being approved, there's going to be more in that corridor that's going to potentially generate even more funds. I don't think the North has any danger of being shorted. in any way, shape, or form. If we do 50%, there's no danger. We've never had, even with funding that deal with the tax abatement and all, we never came close to spending 50% at any time of the funds. So I'm very comfortable with that we're not, would have to do that. And if I wasn't comfortable with that, I would never vote that way. And I would vote the same way today with those current concerns, because I know that we're taking care of that. If we were trying to vote more than that, I would not be comfortable with that, and I would support that. I've only had one person have had one of the persons that want to talk to me about it, have not, and I said, here's how you can reach me to do that. Haven't heard back, but so hopefully we can get that resolved. But I think the South, because of the reasons you just mentioned, and we've stated that before, that they're not generating the funds to do that, but we're developing stuff. And each of these businesses, if we get up and going, are gonna bring a little bit more in there and develop that stuff and give potential to do that. And so that's where I'm looking at. I am disappointed, like you are, Jim, that 2 months ago we sent a proposal to City Council and they've tabled the whole thing. So we've got all these businesses that we're trying to help and funds that are sitting there idle, not being used, that we can try to help people. Because our job is to take the funds that are generated and get them working. And so.
More, that if the city council had even approved the funding of the South that we approved out of North, it's just more money going to come back into the South, right, in the next year or two. And it defies logic that nobody wants to take the money away and create one fund. We want to preserve the North's got an excess, and our goal is to build up the South where that we kind of stay equilibrium on both funds, and that was the whole reason for the 50%.
Before we continue this, John Mark asked,
Well,
to
and-
be recognized to make some comments.
And I wasn't at the meeting, I was out of town at work the day of that meeting. I would have voted no. That may not have made a difference in the recommendation. From that perspective, and with the comments from the public, with the comments, the way to get it off a high center, I would think, would be to bring, with the comments from the public meetings, to be able to come back, have another discussion here, hear from the public again here at this meeting, because it really wasn't anything that was necessarily well publicized that we were going to be considering that either before we got started. So I would, in answer to your question, I would be in favor of bringing it back for further discussion here before referring it back to council. But, you know, the impression I got from the mayor at the town hall meeting was that she didn't have any plans at all to put this up for a vote again anytime in the near future. So, I mean, I think unless we do something proactive to address the issue, it will probably stay where it is.
Well, of course, your comments were well made, but one thing we need to find out is why the mayor did not want to take it to a vote so that we can, I'd like to know what her objection is and why, so that we can deal with it here, because there's no reason to send it back to the city council if she's going to have the same objection. I mean, I'd like to know why.
I will say, I can't speak to that, but I will say, whether you all bring it back to have a public hearing and invite the citizens to come, and then you make you either vote the same thing again, or you change it slightly or just disregard it and do away with it. Regardless, if you make that motion, I think the answer from our perspective is that will be voted on by the council, because you as a board have made that recommendation. They have the ability to table it, but they can't table it indefinitely, and it will have to come back. They will have to take a vote one way or the other at some point. And when that point is, how much leeway do they get? That's not a question I can answer, but it will go to them. The main question for me today is, would you all like to have this on your next agenda for the public hearing, as Mr. Hogue has suggested, or would you rather just leave it to the council?
What I'm saying is, and I think a lot of the reason was because I can't speak for the mayor, nor would I pretend to, but I suspect, I was on council when we created the TIRZ, and I know the dynamics at play and some of the personalities at play was because I assumed she was trying to avoid having a big knockdown drag-out between north and south at the sessions, I suppose. But let me finish. There's a lot of emotion and a lot of feelings that go into this, not necessarily based upon rationale or reason. And so I think that's an issue. The impression that I got from the mayor when she was asked point blank by Mr. Morrison at the first town hall meeting was he wanted to know when there was going to be an opportunity to discuss that. And she basically, the indication I got, the answer was, you know, we don't know. It was, we'll have it when we said it, I think was the answer, or something to that, words to that effect. So I'm just afraid by that I do think this is an important issue. I think it needs to be discussed, and I commend the board for bringing it up, because I think it's the elephant in the room that we have to discuss at some point. We might as well discuss it now. But I don't know what the procedural aspect is of, you know, how long they can sit on a recommendation from the board. I assume they wouldn't have to take any action on it if they didn't want to. There's nothing we could do to make the city council.
Well,
vote one way or the other.
excuse me, and thank you,
That's all.
John Mark.
That's all my comments.
Well, I appreciate your comments. Let me put in my 2 cents here for a minute. We're never going to make any substantive, meaningful progress on developing downtown San Angelo until we have some kind of equity and funding to where the north and the south is not the issue. The issue is we have a handful of good applications that we couldn't fund in February. And that's the tragedy. These young couples that are willing to invest their lives and their equity and whatever into downtown south, and we can't do anything about it.
That's right.
We are handcuffed. And until we change this funding formula some way that's equitable and fair to everyone, we've got to have money, folks. We've got to have money. And I am tired of coming to these meetings and wasting my time and your time where we don't have a chance to help people. I mean, we got $100,000, whatever it is in the South. Give me a break. And we got to come up with a way to settle this and to solve this problem. And I don't want to do it at the expense of hurting anyone in the north, because there's been some good projects up there. I want to see more projects. We're not up there selling that the way we need to be selling it. But I'm tired of coming to these meetings and listening to these, and most of these applicants are young people. Folks, that's where we need to be investing our money. In these young couples that are willing to take the risk. But until we do something to get the city council, the mayor to change her mind for that, let them vote on it and flesh it out. I mean, we know where the ultimate decision has to be made.
I have a question for
Yes,
staff, which probably doesn't help answer the question that staff really needs to have answered, but have we done an analysis of the properties, the number of properties in the north compared to the number of properties in the south, to know, I mean, are there sufficient properties in the north that, given good economic circumstances and people were wanting to actually apply for it, that we would actually be able to spend that money in the north? That might be something worth answering.
We haven't done an analysis of that, but having driven around that area after the last town hall meeting, there are a substantial number of properties that could be redeveloped, that could use improvement.
Well, but I just mean compared to, between the north and the south zones, you know, if you've got, I have no idea what the number of properties in the south, but in the north, you do have bigger tracts with fewer owners, whereas in the south, you have more density and you may have more property owners and more tracts and more opportunities for applications. I'm just wondering if we need to approach it from a practical standpoint, if there's $2 million for the north, are there really enough owners and tracks, individual tracks that people could apply for to actually use that $2 million? Or is it a situation where even if we got the same kind of activity going in the north that we have in the south, we still wouldn't be able to use $2 million? Do you see what I'm asking?
Sure, yeah. I will point out that one of the other things that came up in the meeting was looking at some public projects, and I know staff has already begun looking at whether it be streetscaping, street lighting, street trees, some of those kinds of things, in using some of that excess, just like we were doing Chadburn, which is mostly in the south tiers, looking at, there's already a street improvement project for North Chadburn that is coming in the next couple of years, maybe piggybacking on that and doing some of the aesthetic street improvements like we did on this part of Chadburn.
I understand, but I would still like to know if we had even a close approximation of the economic activity in the north zone that we now have in the south, is that even going to be enough to spend all that $2 million? Because if it's not, if we don't do something and that $2 million stays there, it may never get used. And that's the thing, I think that's the big picture, because there's a lot of emotion over the $2 million and the north having its money and the south having its money. But if the simple fact is, because of, even if the mayor's efforts to encourage people to apply for these funds is successful and we get more applications in from the north, are they ever not gonna have $1 million just sitting in the bank, or $2 million not doing anything?
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna say something when he gets through.
Okay.
But I just think that's a question that probably needs to be asked at some time. I would want to know that if I was a council member and I was having to vote on this. But I mean, I would be in favor of bringing it back. I understand if we don't want to, if we just let the city council do what it's going to do. But and I can make my comments known at that meeting. I don't have to do it here.
Well, your comments are well made. Mr. Brown?
Yes. When I was appointed to this board by the county, I looked at all the background, the history of the whole thing, because I'd retired as city manager when this was created. And the whole purpose of our being is to improve the tax base for the city and the county. For whatever benefits the city also benefits the county as far as the tax base. There's never going to be, in my opinion, and I think I know the town as well as anybody, the center of activity is the central business district and the south, and that's going to continue to grow because of the way it exists right now. There's not going to be that same level of activity and grant applications from the north as we have from the south zone, because the central business district is just going to create it by its own nature and environment. My personal opinion is you can have all the public hearings you want. It's not going to change this thing. We're out of money in the south. And unless we do something, my recommendation and my personal feeling is that it go back to the city council to fund those projects in the south out of north money right now, vote it up or down. And also to resubmit our proposal that the funds be combined initially as proposed. And the council voted up or down, one way or the other right now.
Well, he brings the same point. That's basically my question is there ever a set of circumstances in the foreseeable future where we would actually be able to spend that $2 million in the north?
We would have to look into that more.
Yeah, I mean, I
think
don't
the
know.
answer is probably
I'm sure you
yes,
could.
but
I'm sure you could project that.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody can. I can't. But that's my question. And I think I've looked at the number of properties that you have and the owners, and to me there looked like a big discrepancy on how much. And I think that it does go with what Stephen's talking about, the central business district activity. So if we don't do something, are we, in a few years, are we going to have $3 million or $4 million sitting in there? And that's a question that council, council's gonna have to answer that for us one day, eventually, at some point. Because it's not a good use of the taxpayers' funds to just have it sitting in the
Just
bank.
sitting there, it's not me.
But anyway, that's my thoughts.
Okay. Well, both of you made great comments, and do we want to deal with what Stephen brought up in a motion?
I'll make a motion and see what happens.
Okay.
That be resubmitted to the council as originally proposed, and that the funds voted for the south be taken out of the north, and the council voted up or down, one way or the other.
You're talking about the grant applications
Yes,
that
the
we
grant
sent to the
applications
city
and the
council?
proposal to split the
Yeah.
fund. Go back to the council for reconsideration.
Well,
I think that, well, the grant applications are moving forward on that track anyway. I don't think, I don't think you could bring those back.
Yeah.
It's already being scheduled for a council meeting, so.
Okay, then it's already scheduled, that's fine, but my motion is that both of them be repositioned on the city council agenda for consideration as separate items for vote by the city council.
I think what he's saying is we don't need to bring it back here.
Yeah.
What you're saying is we don't need
Yeah,
to
and
bring it
I
back
guess
here for
my only,
reconsideration.
my only thought is I'm not sure an action item.
Yep.
This wasn't posted, this was posted as discussion.
all right.
That could be the general consensus of
Well,
the group,
let's-
but I don't think we
let-
can take a motion on
Well,
it.
let me restate that. This, whatever it takes to get the city council off a high center, and I want to be sensitive what Dudra said, and somehow, if it comes back, if they remand it back to us for whatever reason, then we can address the issues that Dudra has spoken to,
Dudra makes a good
and whether we can get another supermajority or not. And I'm sensitive to what you're saying, Dudra, and so I want to get you some relief there. But,
We can do that, move it on to them, and if they send it back to you, then obviously we'll bring it back, but otherwise we'll move it straight on to council.
We sent two separate motions. We sent one to do the funding for the project right now.
Correct.
And one to do the long term. So our number one thing is to get the current funding for the projects.
for the ones that we sent over. I
That's
mean,
what-
we've
that's
got,
what we wanted to act
we've got
on
some
first.
applicants that are in just total limbo. They don't know
We got
whether
applicants
to.
from February
Yeah.
sitting in hold.
That's
that we
right.
waited from January to
Yeah.
act on.
That's right.
So really, they've been waiting for 90 days.
That's right.
We want them to act on, then they can make a decision about the long term at a later date. We want them to act on
Well, but
that
isn't-
stuff we've been working on for 90 days.
But aren't with those applications, it was being funded from the North funds though, right?
Yes.
Part of
Yeah,
it
so,
funded from the north.
I mean-
But it wouldn't be a permanent effect, it'd be a one-time thing.
Yeah, under the current rules.
Yeah, I
Any
understand.
project can be funded with the supermajority vote, and that's what you acted under.
Yeah.
It's a one-time.
I understand, but the fight is the same. The fight's gonna be the same no matter which one you do it under.
The
so.
discussion, the fight will all be on the same issue. You're right.
Right.
And it's not going to be one time, it's not going to be one time unless the council changes the funding mechanism that we're recommending. Because if we,
Right.
next month, if we come up with a $100,000 good project in the south that has no money, we're going to vote to fund it out of the north. So this is going to be a recurring thing, and the council needs to understand. I told them that, but sometimes people don't listen.
Yeah, and that's your right. Every meeting, you could vote to fund projects
Yeah.
in the South with North money as long as it gets a supermajority vote by the board.
Is there any information as to when the vote would be scheduled for council or when they might take it up again?
No, I'm hoping to put that on the May 17th.
Well, I
council
do
meeting,
agree,
but-
I do agree that those that have applied for it, those grant applications have to be considered. I mean,
They need an answer.
Right,
they'll have to vote those up or down.
Yeah, they
Right.
need an answer in deference to those.
Yeah, those people.
Young people that are waiting to, we need to get that taken care of.
That's right.
okay.
When's the next council meeting?
Next Tuesday,
Can you put the funding from the south to the north, north to the south, next, that agenda?
it's too late to get on that agenda.
Too late to get on next week's agenda?
It's a week from today. that-
72-hour requirement.
Well, right, for the posting, but we have an internal process that those are due in
That didn't make any sense, John. You can put it on the agenda.
I would have to defer to the city manager and the mayor, who would have to make that decision.
Well, that's
If
my
if they direct
recommendation.
us to do that, the item is ready to go, so.
City manager and the mayor talking together, and I guess that's what's going on, right?
You got that? Okay, folks, we're getting into areas that are way over my pay grade. Because I can't do anything about them. We've got to, the city council has got to take care of that business one way or the other. Again, I think we're all sensitive to the applicants that were here in good faith.
Yes,
They
absolutely.
did the paperwork according to what had to be done. And so it's in the city council's vote right now to take care of that. And then we'll go from there. All right, director's report.
I didn't have anything else to add other than that, unless you all
Okay.
have questions.
All right, folks, I want everyone here to know how much I appreciate you, and I appreciate your comments, and it's important, and I appreciate you. Okay, anyone have future agenda items other than what we've already talked about for next meeting on May 24th?
No.
Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.